Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and ting. Back with some more vibes for all you. I'm Mr. Giant. And we're going back into the Napoleon vibe again. This one is Wellington's Triumph, Vitoria, 1813. Yes, and I do believe in the last episode, the road to Leipzig, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, or Leipzig. We sort of seeing the decline of the mysterious power of Napoleon with the retreat and stuff like that, running from Moscow and being stopped by the weather and all that stuff, and then had to run back to France and regroup and then come back and all of that. So we're starting to see a decline in his great image that he have of power, absolute power over everything. So let's continue and see what else is going on here. Let's YouTube and simmer. Vibes on. Okay. While the Allied armies had seized the initiative and were on the march, the French armies were scattered all over Spain. Ooh, we in Spain now. España. Marshal Jourdan.
May 1813. While Napoleon's Grande Armée began its fight back in Central Europe following the disastrous invasion of Russia, 1,200 miles away, at the other end of Napoleon's embattled empire, another enemy was poised to strike. The previous year, Wellington's Anglo-Portuguese army had won a brilliant victory at Salamanca, but been held at Burgos and forced into a long, demoralizing retreat back to the Portuguese frontier. But after a winter of rest, reinforcement and training, Wellington's army was stronger than ever.
Here comes the red coats.
100,000 men, many of them battle-hardened veterans. And for the first time, he had sufficient cavalry and artillery, while transport and medical services had also been improved. Morale was
ready.
high. Their chief, known to the troops as Old Nosy, was cheered wherever he went. I never saw the British army so healthy or so strong, Wellington informed London. In contrast, the French position in Spain was weaker than ever. Napoleon severely underestimated the threat posed by Wellington and had just withdrawn 20,000 French troops for his own use in Germany. As commander-in-chief, King Joseph knew his forces were overstretched. Napoleon allowed him to give up Madrid and move his capital to the more easily defended Valladolid. But withdrawing further to a strong position like the Ebro River was out of the question. That would send the wrong message to neutral Austria and Napoleon's wavering German allies. And so, with serious concerns, Joseph and his chief of staff, Marshal Jourdan, awaited Wellington's offensive. This video is sponsored by
Marshal Jourdan,
Legends, the free-to-play RPG in which you build a team of champions to battle the forces of darkness. The game features 16 factions, including the Banner
I'm gonna skip this if you all don't mind. In a few days, we shall take the field. The campaign bids fair to be most brilliant. I hope to see the Pyrenees before September. The Pyrenees. Okay. It's like, what is that? I know what that is. Lieutenant George Simons. Or Simons. Because I guess that's British.
Was
Simons.
His army to advance in two wings, concentrate at Toro, then move against Joseph's forces. In the south, Murray's Anglo-Sicilian Spanish force, based in Alicante, had just repelled an attack by Marshal Suchet at the Battle of Castalla. Murray would now mount a diversionary landing on the Mediterranean
I like the narrator's
to
voice.
coincide with Wellington's advance. and prevent Suchet sending reinforcements north. Wellington had also counted on large-scale support from Spanish regular forces, of which he was, since November 1812, theoretically commander-in-chief.
That man's
The
got the
Spanish
power.
Cortes, based in Cadiz, was deeply divided, with many still highly suspicious of British motives. The result was that Wellington would only receive direct support from a few reliable Spanish divisions. Fortunately, he would receive considerable Spanish support from the guerrillas, now better armed, organized, and operating in greater numbers than ever before.
The people.
A large area of Valencia had effectively been liberated by El Fraile, the Friar. Esposimina had captured major towns in Navarre and was currently keeping General Clausel's Army of the North busy, while Juan Martín Díaz, aka El Empecinado, was tying down large numbers of French troops near Madrid.
Farewell, Portugal. I shall never see thee again. Marquis of Wellington. Portuguese
On the
frontier.
22nd of May, Wellington bid farewell to Portugal and began his advance. 4 days later, he was in Salamanca, from where he joined the northern wing of his army under Sir Thomas Graham. Joseph and Jourdan expected Wellington's main thrust to come from Salamanca, so planned to defend the line of the Douro River. But Graham's rapid advance north of the river meant they'd already been outflanked, and they ordered a retreat. By a series of brilliant marches, Wellington continued threatening the French right flank, forcing Joseph to keep falling back. Wellington's army was able to use small roads and mountain tracks north of the main highway, which the French had dismissed as impassable. But thanks to his Spanish allies, Wellington knew better.
He had all the
Thanks to
intel.
British sea power, he was also now able to switch his supply base from Lisbon to Santander, drastically reducing the length of his supply lines, another feat the French had written off as impossible. At the Ebro River, the French found themselves outflanked yet again, and fell back to Vitoria. Here, Joseph decided that he must make his stand. The Zadora River valley west of Vitoria seemed to offer a strong defensive position. Expecting an attack from the west, French forces were drawn up in 3 lines. General Gazon's Army of the South formed...
Man, it's like everything is crumbling for Napoleon. I mean, the defeat in Russia, and now look at Spain. You know, and allies, they just keep jumping ship. Which I guess you could liken that to a lot of modern day wars and stuff. But when the strong man, there's a hint of a weakness in the strong man. Oh yeah, the vultures are coming to come in. The feast on the remnants. But this is crazy, man. Yeah, but imagine living in those times and you know, you're paying attention to the wars that's going on. You see the impending end of an era with Napoleon just running ramshot over everything, you know what I mean? Just to watch that, and you know, at the time that was kind of like a world war there. That's a whole continent going at it. Of course, they fight in other places for territory and stuff too, you know, while all of this is going on.
The first line, then General D'Erlon's Army of the Centre, then General Rey's Army of Portugal. Joseph hoped that he could at least buy time for the vast wagon convoy assembled east of the city to get away. It contained not only military supplies, but his government's treasury. And as satirized by this contemporary British cartoon, the accumulated loot of 5 years' French occupation of Spain, including priceless works of art, jewels, and antiques.
We're running with the people's things.
General Clausel to arrive with 20,000 reinforcements any day. However, thanks to the guerrillas, Wellington was better informed of Clausel's whereabouts than Joseph himself. Knowing that Clausel couldn't reach Joseph before the 22nd of June, he decided to attack on the 21st. The day before, French patrols reported enemy troop movement to the north, so Rey's troops were moved to cover any threat to the army's line of communications. Apart from one division, which left to escort part of the wagon convoy to France. An odd decision that deprived the army of 4,000 men on the eve of battle. Marshal Jourdan had been bedridden with fever that day. The next morning, he reconnoitered the army's position with King Joseph. They agreed that their position was overextended and should be shortened. But by the time their orders reached General Gazan, it was too late. He was already under attack.
A sharp firing on the right gave us notice that the ball had been opened. Second Lieutenant George L'Estrange. That's what this sounds like, but I know that's got to be French. 31st Regiment of Foot.
Wellington, enjoying the advantage in numbers for once, had decided to attack in 4 columns across a 10-mile front, with General Graham's left-hand column threatening Joseph's line of retreat. It was a bold plan, with the potential to trap and destroy Joseph's army, but required careful coordination and precise timing. Fortunately, the French had not thought it necessary to destroy any of the bridges over the Zadora River, which was also fordable in several places. At 8 a.m., General Hill's column began its attack on the Allied right. Spanish and British troops advanced up the western heights of Puebla, driving off French skirmishers, and forcing General Gazan to send reinforcements to secure his left flank. Hill's troops then seized the village of Subiana, but French cannon fire and counterattacks prevented any further advance. Convinced that Hill's attack was the main assault, and the troop movements to the north were probably a diversion, Jourdan continued to send troops from the center to reinforce the left.
Wow.
This was exactly what Wellington wanted. But at 11
a.m.,
he was waiting with growing impatience for his other columns to go into action. Lord Dalhousie's 7th Division, supposed to be leading the attack by the center-left column, had got held up in the mountains. While further east, Graham's flanking move had got off to a cautious start. But seeing the size of the approaching force, General Rey decided to pull back his troops across the Zadora River. This encouraged Graham to get things moving. Colonel Longa's Spanish division advanced on Durana, held by Spanish troops loyal to King Joseph, and a bitter struggle for the village ensued. British and Portuguese infantry advanced against Camara Mayor. They were soon engaged in bloody street fighting with the French. This scene shows an attack by the 4th King's Own Regiment of Foot and the 47th Lancashire Regiment. Though they succeeded in driving the French out of the village, they could not cross its bridge over the Zadora, which was expertly covered by French guns.
Come on, ye rascals! Come on, ye fighting villains!
Around noon, a Spanish peasant informed Wellington that the bridge at Tres Puentes was completely unguarded. He immediately ordered Kempt's elite light infantry brigade to dash across it and secure a bridgehead. But there was still little sign of Dalhousie's 7th Division. General Picton, the notoriously short-tempered commander of the fighting 3rd Division, ran out of patience. Fed up with waiting for Dalhousie, he ordered his men to advance. They charged across the Mendoza Bridge and a nearby ford, driving back light French defenses. General Gazan, with his left flank pinned down at Subiana, was now about to be outflanked on his right, and had no option but to pull back his troops.
Chasing them back, boy. They're on the
Wellington's
run.
army was now crossing the Zadora River in force. Heavy fighting continued to rage on the heights of Puebla, but here the French also had to give ground to maintain the cohesion of their new line. Scottish Highlanders and Connaught Rangers, supported by riflemen and Portuguese troops, now stormed the village of Arigneth, routing the defenders, who retreated southeast, and a gap began to emerge in the French centre between Gazon's army of the south and d'Erlon's army of the centre. The Allied advance continued, with heavy pressure on both French flanks. Wellington's army appeared to be building unstoppable momentum, with Graham's column poised to cut off Joseph's escape.
Man. Artillery and musketry were heard in one continuous, uninterrupted volume of sound. The fire had already become exceedingly violent. War is just the sound of it is violent, even if you're not on the front line, but you're hearing it from a distance. It's a violent sound. It's a violent sound.
By 4 p.m., Wellington's army was formed up across the Zadora, ready to strike a decisive blow. But his infantry came under heavy fire from 76 French guns, blasting great holes in their ranks. Allied guns were brought forward to provide support. The biggest artillery duel of the Peninsula War began. More than 70 guns on each side. Allied skirmishers, exploiting the gap in the French centre near Gomecha, were able to work their way behind the French guns and shoot down their crews. Gazon found himself threatened on both flanks. But instead of trying to close up with d'Erlon to his north, on his own initiative he ordered a retreat that left d'Erlon's own left flank completely exposed. Around the same time, Longa's Spanish troops finally captured Durana, and rumors swept the French army that their escape route had been cut. d'Erlon's army of the centre fought on bravely, withdrawing to another new defensive line just 1 mile west of Vitoria. French guns kept up a steady fire on the advancing Allied lines, but once more the position was outflanked. Around 5:30 p.m., King Joseph bowed to the inevitable and ordered a general retreat.
$5 million were abandoned by the French and left upon the ground. Man, they just like
As the main road to
survive.
France had now been cut by Longa's Spanish troops, the army would have to retreat east towards Pamplona along a single narrow road with boggy fields on either side. Bad enough for thousands of troops and guns, but there had been no attempt to move off the army's enormous convoy of wagons earlier in the day. The result was pandemonium, as military units and artillery tried to force their way through the streets of Vitoria and the congested lanes and fields beyond. The task of forming a rearguard fell to General Wey's Army of Portugal, which conducted an organized withdrawal covered by its cavalry. Wellington hoped that Graham's column would now be surging across the Zadora River to cut off the French army's retreat. But Graham, overestimating the enemy's strength, continued to take a cautious approach. East of Vitoria, the French retreat descended into total chaos. The single narrow road became blocked. Wagons that took to the fields got stuck and were abandoned. Allied cavalry fell upon this confused mass, spreading panic and meeting little serious opposition.
Wow.
Joseph and Marshal Jourdan themselves narrowly escaped capture. Among the abandoned wagons, many civilians, including officers, wives and children, priceless paintings, jewels and furniture.
Yeah, wait.
5 million.
Dudes run and leave their wife and children and thing? That part just hit me. You're like, what? They ran and left their wife and children and they abandoned. I guess they figure in those times, you know, there's a little bit more chivalry, so they wouldn't hurt the women and the children.
Gold
Different
francs.
times, I guess.
Troops on both sides broke ranks and dived into an orgy of plundering. One British officer described the scene. About dusk, the head of our column came suddenly on some wagons which had been abandoned by the enemy. Someone called out, "They are money carts." No sooner were the words uttered than the division broke as if by word of command, and in an instant the covers disappeared from the wagons and nothing was seen but a mass of inverted legs, while the arms were groping for dollars. For money it certainly was. The scene was disgraceful, but at the same time, ludicrous. Wellington, however, was furious. Not only did the plundering delay pursuit of the enemy, but giant sums of cash, which might have paid for his army's supplies, vanished into private pockets instead.
Oh, wow.
Of 5.5 million francs, only 250,000 were ever recovered by the army.
Dudes went back home and lived in
Vitoria was a
luxury.
great victory for the coalition. Not as crushing as it might have been, reflected in relatively light French casualties. But in the chaotic retreat that followed, the Allies did capture all but 2 of 153 French guns, and even Jourdan's Marshal's bateau.
You have sent me among the trophies of your unrivaled fame, the baton of the French Marshal, and I send you in return that of England. The British Army will bail it with rapturous enthusiasm. With rapturous enthusiasm. I like the way they talk. With rapturous enthusiasm.
French military power in Iberia was broken. The Bonapartist Kingdom of Spain was at an end. Joseph returned to France to face his brother's criticism. Marshal Jourdan retired from active service. Napoleon sent Marshal Soult to replace them, but even his shrewd military mind could not turn the tide in Spain. Counterattacks to relieve the French garrisons at Pamplona and San Sebastian were defeated. That autumn, Wellington began what proved an unstoppable advance across the Pyrenees and into France.
The Pyrenees.
In southern Spain, where Marshal Suchet remained undefeated, the disaster at Vitoria forced him also to withdraw towards the frontier, leaving behind just a few isolated garrisons. After a bitter 5-year struggle, the Allies had brought the Peninsular War, to the Spanish their War of Independence, to a victorious conclusion. It had been a long, hard road, steeped in blood and suffering. The alliance between Britain and Spain had been particularly treacherous to navigate. But ultimately, both nations had fought together with Portugal to drive the French back across the Pyrenees. New research provides a clearer insight than ever into the huge attrition of French manpower in Iberia. An estimated total of 260,000 lives lost. 3/4 died of sickness. Of approximately 66,000 deaths from combat, 43% were in actions against Spanish regular forces, 38% fighting British-led armies, and 19% fighting guerrillas. By contrast, British military deaths are
Sickness
estimated
took
at
most of them.
52,000, Portuguese 15,000, with many more thousands of civilian deaths, while Spanish deaths are unknown, though the country as a whole may have lost as many as 500,000 lives in 5 years of war and occupation. For Napoleon, this disaster had been an unnecessary and largely self-inflicted wound, an intervention born of arrogance and false assumptions, with dire strategic consequences. But as the Napoleonic Empire crumbled in Spain, An even greater struggle neared its climax in Central Europe, where Napoleon faced the most powerful coalition of his enemies yet. If the French Emperor was victorious in Germany, Wellington might soon be scrambling back across the Pyrenees. The fate of Europe was about to be decided at the Battle of Leipzig.
Yeah.
Thank you to...
I tell you, man, Europe, it's and a lot of it is landlocked, so I'm assuming that's part of it. But they just switch allies, you know. This is an ally, this is an ally, this is mine. No, not anymore. Independence here, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff going on over the years over there, you know. Religious conflicts, you know, political stuff, rich people, greed, man. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I think that's one reason why I'm so intrigued by that history. But anyway, man, thank you all for tuning in. Remember to take care of each other. Go out there, get to know a stranger, understand the stranger, and keep it cool running. All right?